Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Corporate Quitter. Today's guest I have on is Justin Peters. We had a great conversation around just transitioning in careers, taking career sabbaticals, and if you should quit your job or just take a break, basically. He gets into detail about how to ask your employer for a career sabbatical, things you can do when you take your career sabbatical, and if you decide it's not for you, you don't want to pursue entrepreneurship, and you actually want to be back in the traditional job force, how to transition back in there, smooth sailings, and to highlight your skill set that you acquired during your career break in a way that's really attractive to employers. So, just a little context, Justin Peters, number one, he is connected to Gabby Dimeke. She was one of the first episodes that I recorded with on this show. I think it was episode maybe 18 or 19. A great episode. She talks about photography business and freelancing, which is really great if you want to check it out. But Justin is a podcast manager and also a host, which is really great. So we both had a great time doing what we do best. And his podcasting journey started in December 2019 when he started his first career sabbatical. And since then, basically, he's had his podcast, The Struggle is Real, that helps 20 somethings really looking to master good money habits. And he has all different conversations around money and investing, the fire movement, all of that stuff. So if that sounds like you, definitely go check it out. But basically, him and his, again, passion project basically became a career when him and his brother Kyle joined up to create the Simple Pod Studios. So his career sabbatical, him dabbling with his, joy and curiosity of doing a podcast now has become his full-time career. He no longer works a regular job and now just does that full time while again still pursuing the things he wants to do. So we had a great conversation. We had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about career sabbaticals and things you can do to position yourself correctly when you leave and if you return, and if it's even possible for you, right? For some of you, it might not be something that's accessible. For some of you, it might be the perfect scenario for you. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Before we get into it, I just want to mention and thank our sponsor, Novo. They're not just a bank, they're a fintech company. I use them and many of my friends and founders here in Austin, as well as all over, use them. I actually just met with the team last week, and unfortunately, I'm under NDA, so I can't share some of the juicy details that we went over. But let me just tell you, if you're not yet signed up for them, you definitely want to be, because some of the things that are in product development that are soon to kind of unfold within the next 6 months, right? Basically until the end of 2024, are some of the most groundbreaking tool and just things that I really wish I thought of, but I can't. But basically, if you want your business to be easier, if you want getting money to be easier, if you want transactions to be easier, if you want a bunch of different things in your career, in your progression of business, specifically for entrepreneurs and small businesses, you want to get an account ASAP, because when these things go live, when the products and services and offerings that they're in development and working on go live, you definitely want to be grandfathered in, but you also want to be able to take advantage of it. You can find more info or you can sign up for free by clicking the link below in our show notes or on our YouTube channel. Now let's get into today's episode. Welcome to this episode of Corporate Quitter. I'm very excited to have Justin Peters on today to talk about a couple of really sexy things that are on trend right now, specifically the FIRE movement, career sabbaticals, all the things pertaining to that. So Justin, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me, Gabby. And I'm glad that you think the fire movement and career sabbaticals are sexy.
Well, they are. I mean, like, isn't that the thing that everyone aspires to have, is like money freedom, which equals time freedom, which also means like exploration, sort of expression freedom, if you will, you know?
I think the fire movement's actually been evolving over the last 5 years or so. And I think it's much more approachable and much more broad in terms of who it would potentially be for. So I think that's why it's also picked up some steam here recently.
Can you actually get into what is the FIRE movement for those who are like, I have no fucking idea what this acronym means? What does it entail? What is that?
Yeah, so the FIRE movement, well, FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. This is really just a group of people that want to retire way earlier than traditional retirement age. So rather than 65, people are looking to retire in their 50s, their 40s, even sometimes their 30s. And they do that by heavily saving and investing so that they can grow their assets enough so that they don't have to depend on an income either from W-2 employment or even in some cases their own business.
Do you find that people in the FIRE movement are predominantly people who work a steady corporate job, or do you find that some people aim for the FIRE movement but through self-employment? Do you think that's even possible, or is that a really hard thing to do in the beginning?
From my experience and my exposure, I think most people are typically starting out in a corporate environment or on a corporate salary and then transitioning to self employment. Sometimes doing that after they reach financial independence, sometimes before as they continue to build. I think it's just a great way to use your corporate salary, your corporate employment to get a jump start on some of the saving and investing. But of course, I think it's been changing and evolving a lot over the last 5 years. And I see a lot of people in the entrepreneurship space also pursuing FIRE.
Since you mentioned there's changes in the environment, and obviously I would assume because of the introduction of remote work and like the crazy economic shifts, like things, it's a dumpster fire out there right now in terms of what's going on economically in the US, but also globally. Can you talk a little bit more about those changes and how maybe people who are trying to continue building on the fire movement are benefiting maybe from those economic shifts and changes? And maybe what are some misconceptions or even problems that are arising as a result of what was done in the past?
Yeah, so a quick story on the fire movement. So I think the terminology and the concept really was born in the 90s, but it really picked up steam or quote unquote fire in the 2000s. And a lot of early fire movement people were traditionally high income earners in the tech space or at minimum white collar space. And a lot of them were running away from something, which was more times than not their 9 to 5. Like they're like, man, I make $200,000. I can't really leave this employment because I can't find another job or I can't start a business that will supplement that income. They came across fire and they're like, sweet, I'm gonna like heavily save and invest so I can quickly get out of this career and out of this job in, let's say, 10 years. So that was like traditional fire in the 2000s and all the way through, kind of the 2010s. Some people also started to pick up around 2009, 2010 after the Great Recession, and they caught the coattails of this giant bull market that we've been in since then. Over the last 15 years, the stock market has done extremely well. So we've seen a lot of people start saving and investing in, the early 2010s, and they're like now 35, 40 years old and have enough money somewhere in the $1 to $2 million range to actually sit back, retire. And I think now that we finally have some examples of people that have successfully fired, more people are starting to realize, ooh, I do want that freedom. I do want work optionality. And I really think that's kind of where we're at with not only the fire movement, but also just like what people are looking for in their career in general. Like so many of my friends, and Gabby, you can comment on this too. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but they're multifaceted whenever it comes to their careers, or at
Hmm.
minimum interested in at least multiple careers throughout their entire lifetime. Like so many of my friends, they're like, I work as a tour guide in the summer. I do yoga instructing whenever I'm back home, and I run a painting business on the side. And like they build their income in like 3 or 4 different stacks. And I think that's really cool and interesting. And I think a lot of other people are trying to see this like, man, I don't want all of my income to be dependent on one certain career path. And
Yep.
also, like, I'm just interested in a lot of different things too. Therefore, I want to give myself freedom away from money so that I can pursue whatever passions or interests that I have in the professional sense.
Yeah, it is really interesting because of the emergence of the creator economy, TikTok, things like that. How we went to a place of like, before that, oh, wanting to stretch outside the 9 to 5 and do a couple different things, right? Bartending, being the barista, the dog walker, those things were starting to pick up steam. But now it's like on steroids, where like, if you, especially if you niche down, like I know someone who she makes a ton of money just teaching girlies how to DIY their bathroom so they do waterproof tiling. Like literally that's her whole entire it is so niche down and she makes so much money from it. But it's just so interesting because like there's such a duality in the work world right now. And at the same time, we're also seeing people have like record breaking salaries. And actually one thing, not to kind of gear off track, but like also crypto is new. And I don't know if that falls into the investing game with the fire movement, but I'm sure it's also a vehicle that people use that wasn't accessible before. Is that also a thing? Or when they talk
Yeah.
about fire, it's more so stocks and funds
I
and whatever other investment vehicles?
Yeah, most of the fire movement leans towards safe and predictable returns.
Hmm.
And crypto, I wouldn't say screams safe or predictable in the
Hmm.
sense of like
It's
the
not.
the the expected return. So more times than not, people are looking at low cost index fund investing in the fire movement. But I think investing can take on multiple different terminologies. There's a lot of people that are investing in real estate or other asset classes out there, crypto being one of them.
Hmm. Now, I hear that there's a lot of, well, myself personally, there's a lot of misconceptions about fire, I think. So some people are like, oh, you have to like kind of tough it out for 10 years. You don't live like a life that's sort of full of experiences. Like there's a lot of this idea of shrinking down or constraint. Is that actually true? Or really, I mean, I'm sure everyone can paint a different picture and do things sort of tailored to their experience, their lifestyle, and where they're at in life. But can you kind of share some misconceptions and things that maybe even you and even Gabby, right, experienced as you were building your sort of fire movement of your own?
Yeah, I would say that's a yes and a no. I do think the fire movement at its heart is not necessarily looking at excessive spending. Therefore, you're reflecting back and you're looking at your purchases and you're just asking yourself, do I actually value what I'm spending money on right now? Which I don't think is an inherently bad thing. I think, yes, the fire movement initially kind of pre this new movement that's coming through probably was a little bit more about deprivation. Like people were like trying to spend $8,000 a year and
Oh my
save
God.
a 102
Where are you
000
living,
of
bro? 'Cause that's not the reality now.
it was insane, they would be, like, living with 8 roommates in an apartment. I do think, like I said, now that more people are coming into the movement, they are trying to find balance with this, but I do think it does give you a heavy dose of reflection to decide what is important whenever it comes to spending for you and really trying to identify that. But what I love the most about the FIRE movement is how creative some of them, like, some people are that are kind of champions of this. And like, yeah, I've cut some things. Like for me, like going out to eat isn't necessarily something that like it brings me so much joy. Like bringing my girlfriend Gabby out on a date, yes, I'll spend money all day long on that, but like just convenience food eating or even the sense of being a foodie and wanting to try new foods, it's not something that I necessarily am prioritizing right now. But
Mhm.
we were talking about this before we press record. Music festivals is super important to me. I spend thousands of dollars on music festivals every single year or conferences, business conferences. I love going to business conferences as well. And what the fire movement has made me do is get a little bit more creative about some of that spending. So
Mhm.
I'm on this like crazy streak of like 7 or 8 conferences that I haven't paid for a ticket yet. And I've
Oh,
just
I
like
love that. That's so
now
cool.
I'm just like always trying to get a free ticket. And it's like once you like actively try to do some of these things, like you recognize this is important, but then you decide, okay, how do I reduce that spending? I have guest spoke at many of conferences. I've applied for their first time scholarships. I've asked vendors if I can come in and be a part of their team. So I've done multiple things to get free tickets without necessarily having to sacrifice going and attending conferences.
Yeah, especially if they're expensive. The last time I went to a conference was about 2 years ago. I'm a little behind. But basically, I wanted to go to this conference here in Austin called Consent. It's about just like blockchain technology and crypto and all
Mhm.
that stuff. And it's a $2,000 ticket, one that I did not want to buy, but I really wanted to go. And just so happened, I was like, let me like check Twitter to see if anyone's giving away tickets. There's got to be some whale out there who's going to give them away. And sure enough, someone's like, DM me and tell me why you should be selected for a free ticket. I did, and I got it literally within like a
Wow.
couple of hours and went the next day. Like that's how nuts those things can happen. But I love that you are reflecting consistently on what's valuable to you because I've also had the same thing of like sometimes the convenience of buying food out is what's most important to me. If I'm, let's say, in a launch mode and I need to make sure I eat so I can sustain it, that's important. But at other times, it's more important to save my money and just have a little nest egg. Like it totally varies. And I love that you don't demonize the things that make life bearable and enjoyable because I think previous generations, that was kind of what they did. At some point in time, you have to figure out, what's the point of living if you're not doing things? You know what I mean? So, anyway,
Yes. Yeah,
um,
I just
yeah.
recorded this podcast episode with a guest, and the title is like 5 secrets to having fun in your fire journey. And it was really fascinating. We had this good conversation about sometimes like sacrifice in the here and the now isn't really worth it. Like
Mhm.
what is, let's say I couldn't find a free way to get a conference ticket. So therefore I need to fork up the $500 or the $1,000 to go and attend that conference. I would still probably do that if that conference is important to me because when you really think about it, a 500 or $1,000 impact on your, annual expenses, how much, if you're looking at the math, like how much more faster will you hit fire because of saving that 500 or $1,000? Like it will be something silly like a month or two. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I think there should be this balance between enjoying the present moment and enjoying the whole path of fire and not trying to run as fast as possible to get to this goal because your life is long and you're going to have plenty of time to spend it however you want. There's this like kind of new look on fire right now, which is called slow fire or coast fire. A lot of people are like slowing down, trying to hit financial independence and pulling back and spending a little bit more now because they're like, okay, if I'm in my 20s or my 30s and I'm making all these sacrifices right now and not enjoying anything, it won't necessarily be the
What's the
same
point?
as
Like,
yeah, it won't be the same as like your 50s or 60s. Like if I want to
yeah.
go and backpack in my 20s or 30s, that experience may be way easier than trying to do that same experience in your 50s or 60s. So, can you balance this or, make some sacrifices to your future self to enjoy some of the now too? I don't That's kind of the conversation or a lot of the discussion that's happening in the fire movement currently.
Yeah, I think the problem a lot of people battle, myself included, is this sort of conditioning we've now had of the instant gratification, right? The Amazon delivery that same day and stuff like that. And I haven't really embraced fire movement in the sense of like, okay, we're going to invest and do all that stuff. But I have had a year of constraint back in 2019, actually. And I paid off all my student loans in a singular year and then quit my job a year and a half later. So, like, I didn't realize at the time I was building towards the future of being an entrepreneur, but sometimes you got to kind of dabble, it's a delicate dance between enjoying life and also being really adamant about, getting to your goals and all of that stuff. The freedom you have from not having debt and experiencing things like that is something that's completely unmatched. Like it really is it feels nice, especially if you've
Yeah,
been trapped for a while.
you can almost like extrapolate what people are trying to accomplish with fire from like their entire lifetime down to maybe a 1 or 2 year viewpoint. So for
Hmm.
you, entrepreneurship, freedom from corporate life was super important to you. So you almost did the same approach that fire people would do, which would be cut back on expenses, start saving so that at one point in time you do have that FU money and you can walk away from those and now step into what you ultimately want to step into. That's almost the exact same concept as fire, but they're just looking at it from a lifetime standpoint. I'm kind of in the camp of if you're trying to accomplish anything, let it be next year or 15 years from now, you could still probably take some of the same concepts, apply them to yourself right now and be on a quote quote path to financial independence, even if it's only in a 2 year runway.
Hmm. Now, when we're talking about, again, financial independence, almost like retirement, all that stuff, one of the things that you had spoke on when we first got connected was this concept of a mini retirement or career sabbaticals, right? Now, I think in recent years, career sabbaticals, especially with the rate of burnout being insane and the pandemic and things like that, it's more common that people are requesting time off, but also, right, we're having a lot of people quit too. So, a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, should I just quit? Should I get a new job? Do I just need a break? So I'm wondering, can you kind of break down that a little bit more in terms of like, when is the right time to take a sabbatical? When is the right time maybe to transition fully? If like, is there a mental sort of conversation that needs to be had or things to be weighed before you do that?
I think it's kind of like two-part for me. I think at least in my own experience, my body, my mind was kind of telling me like I need a break. And I think intuitively most people know whenever they need a break. Second to that is monetarily, can I take the break? And I'm a big numbers guy. It would almost give me more anxiety to take a break and not be able to afford my life than to kind of buckle down in the here and the now, save a little bit of money so I can actually enjoy that time that I'm trying or attempting to take off. So I think it's a little bit of twofold. Like, do you have the means to take time off right now? And is your body and your mind telling you that you need a break? To kind of your secondary question there, like, is this do you just need to take a vacation, like a 1 week vacation? Do you need to take a 1 to 6 month sabbatical from work, or are you ready to actually quit your 9 to 5 and maybe transition into something else? I think you are the only person that can really answer that question. I would advise you to go and approach it as a ladder. Like, why don't you take a week off and just like maybe take a journal with you, sit down, think about what would be all the things that I would want to do if I did have a month off of work or 6 months off of work. What would I want to do if I wasn't doing what I'm currently doing for work currently? And then maybe even start taking some inventory of your finances and trying to figure out mechanically how much time can I take off and how much do I need to continue to save if I want to extend that time off. So you could spend that week, go book yourself a great Airbnb or go back home and just let your parents pamper you or something and just take some time off and relax and see if you just a week reset would do that. Then go ahead and make the case for a mini retirement and take a month off. And then eventually, maybe it's going to be worth an entire transition in your career.
Mhm. Do you find that when people talk about the sabbatical, that it's something that employers are starting to come around to and be okay with, or do you think there's still a lot of pushback? Because we saw remote work, people are still not embracing remote work, which is so weird to me. I'm like, if you're just as productive, and the numbers can't lie, right? Productivity is through the roof for a lot of people. But I mean, career sabbaticals, I think to a lot of employers, they would have never let us do that unless you were like top level executive with massive mental health problems or something.
I would guess it's probably split similar to the work from home situation. Like, I'm with you. I do not understand why some employers aren't extending that opportunity, at least for a subset of their employees.
Hmm.
I I'm kind of in the camp that, like, I understand company culture, maybe
Yep.
innovation, creativity, like all of that might diminish. But there's just as many pros to work from home from an employer standpoint too. And the day where flexibility is the number one thing that I hear that people are looking for, like it just seems like an obvious that you
Yep.
have to at least allow people some kind of work from home situation if their job is compatible to that. I would guess that sabbaticals are probably in the same vein as that. To some employers, this might be a total no. Like this might be a nope, we don't do sabbaticals and they're gonna put their foot down on it. I think on the other vein, many companies and employers will be very open to sabbaticals. But at the end of the day, like, do they have an option? Like if you go to your manager and you're like, hey, I want to take 30 days off. This is the goal that I have for, or how I want to spend that time, or this is why I really need to take that time off. And you let your manager sit with that. If their only option is to either give you that time off or to let you go and replace you, whenever you start thinking about that from an employer standpoint, okay, cool. So they're going to let you go, and now they're going to have to find your replacement. They're going to have to write a job description. They're going to have to post that. They're going to have to let resumes come through. They're going to have to interview people. They're going to have to do secondary interviews. They're going to have to extend an offer. They're going to have to allow that person that accepted the offer 2 weeks to transition out of their old job into this new job. Then there's got to be this ramp up period, this onboarding period.
At least
And
three
at the
months
end,
too. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's not, yeah.
when you're looking at that, that's like minimum of 3 months for that position to be filled, maybe even closer to a year for some specific positions that are out there. And there's no guarantee that person is going to be as good as what you are at your job. So whenever I'm thinking about it from an employer standpoint, I'm maybe even having to really consider allowing you to take that time off because the alternative is way more negatively impactful for the business versus allowing you that time to go and take a sabbatical.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions on how people can approach that conversation? What you just gave as a suggestion is great, as bringing the reality of like, hey, if you don't let me do this, these are all the implications and all the things you have to do to try to find that replacement. But also, like, is there to use like Chat GPT to craft a letter to your employer? Like, what are some of those things that you think your employer would not only appreciate but would help your chances of actually getting approved for it? And also, do you get paid during a sabbatical, or is it a percentage? Like, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, every company has a little bit different policy. There might be a formal sabbatical program at an employer. Like traditionally, universities have a sabbatical program where, like, every 7 years, their professors are allowed to take some time off. And typically, it's like they're encouraged to go and do some research in their field and bring that back to the university. Some companies have also adopted similar programs or built sabbaticals. Others, this would be unpaid time off, or you could maybe build using some PTO and some holidays to kind of elongate some of your paid time off. So maybe there's a blend.
Mhm.
That would have to be a conversation you'd have to have with your HR team for sure. But in terms of delivery, I've never been one to threaten an employer. I've always had pretty good relationships with my managers and my employers. I would like to bring this, kind of create a conversation out of this. So for me personally, if I wanted to take a mini retirement, I'd go to my manager way ahead of time and just let them know that I'm thinking about it. Like, hey, later this year, let's say we're recording this in June right now. In December, I want to take a break from Thanksgiving to the end of the year. I'd go to my manager and I'd say, hey, I'm thinking about taking some time off of work. During that time, this is what I plan to use that time for. And it doesn't have to be something that benefits the employer, but I think you have to have a reason for it,
Hmm.
especially if that like reason is really hard to counter. So like maybe you want to go and hike the Pacific Crest Trail. Like it's really hard for an employer to kind of counter that. Like it's not like it's like I really need some time off of work or I'm thinking about transitioning my career. Like, okay, that storyline is way different than I have this defined goal that I want to do that I really need to focus on and I need a specific time off for. So you paint the picture like that. And then you prepare for what might potentially be an obstacle or an issue. Like, so your manager might come back and they say, yeah, that's a lot of time off. That's a challenging part of the year. How would we finish this task, and this task? And you've already done a good job thinking about that. You're like, yes, this task, I've built an SOP for it, and I know that this team member will be able to accomplish it during my time off because I've already written the instructions for it. Oh, and this meeting, this important meeting that I have to run every month, I already plan to log back in that day and run that meeting or do that report, that monthly report that maybe it's like way too time consuming and it's like a one-time transaction for you to lift and shift that to somebody else. So you can
Hmm.
kind of like think through some of the major obstacles for them, creatively help them overcome those obstacles, and then just like put it back into their court and allow them the space and the time to go and advocate for you to get this time off.
Yeah, I love that all of those are like really tangible steps that people can take. I'm thinking to myself now, like, wow, I wish I knew about that. I mean, obviously I knew about sabbaticals, but being at the job that I had, I don't think it would have been well received. But I also don't think I would have known to do those things ahead of time to prepare to have that conversation. So thank you so much for explaining that. Now, one of the things that I'm thinking about is because the thing is like, oh, I'm gonna go hike the Appalachian or whatever, the Pacific Crest Trail. In my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna do that, but I'm gonna figure out my exit plan, my exit strategy. I'm basically gonna like experiment with business stuff, side hustles, whatever. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to tell that to an employer, so I don't want to lie either. So, I mean, would you just be open and honest about it? About, hey, I want to try all these different hobbies, take some time to myself. Like, I don't know. I don't. I'm a little tied here. I don't want to lie, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, in all honesty, I probably wouldn't tell my employer that I was crafting my exit plan and I needed some time off
Well, not
to do that.
that, but look, I
But
really.
but even something that maybe seemed competitive in nature, like you wanted to take some time off to start your business. Like
Hmm.
some employers might view that as your transition plan or something that is eventually going to lead to your exit.
Hmm.
You are allowed to share as much or little as you want about what your plans are for your sabbatical. And there are like a ton of different options or reasons why somebody might take off. It might be travel. Like they might truly want to go different places that they just can't either get to in a timely manner or they want to slow down their travel and, take a cross country trip or something. It could be quality time with extended family or friends. Like they want to go and spend some time with people that it's been hard to spend some time. It could be projects like maybe you want to redo your house or you want to work on setting up your garden or maybe you just want to recover from burnout or improve your health or focus on a professional development. Like there are many things or reasons why somebody might take a sabbatical. Pick one of those reasons and let your employer know this is the reason for it. Maybe one that doesn't really seem so competitive in nature with
Hmm.
yeah, potential exit plan and share that. You don't have to tell them like this is how I plan to spend all 24 hours every single day of my sabbatical. Like you can just share one reason why and it could be simply like, "Hey, I haven't my parents are getting older and I'm seeing it's more and more challenging for them to travel. I want to go back and spend some time with my family for a couple of weeks and be very intentional with that time."
Hmm.
And that's all you have to say. And at the same time, you could be going back home and building your business plan and launching your business. You could be doing all of those things and also spending time with your family.
Yeah. Just make sure if you're going to do that to block or mute the people who at the job who might see you posting on social about it. Just
For sure.
FYI. But so let's say conversation goes well. They're like, great, we're on board with this. This sounds great. Thanks in advance for telling us. We'll start planning that out. Now you're like, okay, cool. I'm at this point. I've started my first day in the sabbatical. what are some of the mental challenges that I would assume would happen, but that you can overcome during that period? I think there's people think, oh, great, I have time. It's going to be all butterflies and daisies. I can sleep. I can get my rest. I can do this and do. And then what I have found, even for myself, talking to quitters who quit, they experience a quitter hangover, which ends up being like this whole sort of identity crisis, right? Because the first time you've ever had like so much time to yourself. And there's also like when you stop working, there's a sense of like worthlessness that happens because society obviously prioritizes and like validates productivity. So, can you talk a bit about like the transition and what you can expect and the mental challenges you may have to overcome during that 30-day or whatever, how many months it is that you took time off from?
Well, first and foremost, like allow yourself if you need some rest, like if you need that first week of your sabbatical to just like chill out because you've been on hyperdrive for years and years and years, like allow yourself that. Honestly, maybe even intentionally build that into your plan. Like just know the first week is just like
Bed
white
rot,
space,
scrolling,
nothing's
Netflix.
happening. Like yeah, whatever you want to do it. I think that's a really great idea. And I think many people, when they transition out of something like a very stressful career into a sabbatical, probably should and can expect that that's going to happen. Whenever I took my sabbatical, which happened December 2019, I took some time off and I came back to work August of 2020. So I took a 7-month sabbatical. The two major mental hurdles I had to get over was one, pressure from my parents. Like my parents were like, "Wait, you're
What the
quitting your
fuck are
job?"
you doing? I
Yeah.
know. I had the same
What
thing.
are
They're
you
just like, I promise
what
I
are
have a
you
plan.
Yeah, it was really challenging, and honestly, they put a lot of pressure on me throughout my entire sabbatical. They were, like, routinely being like, "Justin, when you gotta get a job, like, do you have health insurance?" Like, they just it all came from a good place, like, they were worried
Mhm.
about me and they wanted to make sure, and it did put a little bit of mental fatigue on me at times, but I knew and I was confident that I had intention behind this time off, and I had a purpose and reason for it. So that was kind of my first mental hurdle that I had to get over, and some of that was just being, like, self-assured with what your plan is. And if you're thinking about mini retirement right now, I'm guessing you're probably gotta be assured or, like, at least feeling like you have put some intentionality behind this time off. It's not like you, like, just got let go or laid off and all of a sudden you have this, like, newfound freedom. You've been thinking about it, processing it, planning for it. The second major mental hurdle that I had to get over was just being present in the moment and not worrying about what was coming next. Like it was
Yeah.
very, very hard for me to be like, oh shoot, I'm taking the sabbatical. I actually left my employer, so I wasn't coming back to a job. Like it wasn't really even a sabbatical. It was just like I had a career break at that time, like an intentional career break. It was very hard for me not to be thinking about what do I want to do next? Where am I going to work?
Yeah.
Where's my next paycheck going to come from? That is also to be expected. And I think it's going to be a challenge that you're going to your experience and going to be hard to get over. I got this great piece of advice from somebody that mentored and coached me along through this sabbatical. And he told me, spend the first half of your sabbatical not thinking about what's next in terms of your career, but spending that time on something that you've always wanted to do, but your career has never allowed you to do that.
Mhm.
So I just knew from the get go, I was taking 6 months off. My first 3 months were going to be for this passion project that I've always wanted to do. And I intentionally wrote down and reminded myself, you don't need to be thinking about your career right now. That's what the second half of my sabbatical was for.
Mhm. I'm wondering for those who take the career break for more like mental health and physical body recuperation, like, okay, I'm just gonna rest. And then the first week goes by and they're like, all right, I can't fucking do this. Like, I know people who are like, oh, I go on vacation and then I'm like itching to get back because I can't just lay on a beach all day. Like me, I love resting and I basically changed the way my relationship is with rest where I enjoy it more. But in the beginning, it was a fight. So for those who are kind of in that battle of like, okay, it started with rest and now I'm having this like, I don't want to say identity crisis, but like, how can one maintain a sense of identity and purpose, right? You mentioned purpose without the structure of a traditional job, not only telling you what your purpose should be and what you should be doing, but even like your day to day routine, right? Because I'm sure in the beginning, especially during that phase of rest and stuff, you're like, I'm literally just laying on my couch all day. There can't be anything good that comes of this. Right. There's a lot of that comes through your head in combination with the societal pressure of friends and family and spouse. And then you're thinking, oh my God, a career break is going to ruin my whatever. So, can you talk about that a little bit in terms of purpose and structure?
Gabby, I feel personally attacked here. I'm also
Why?
No, no, no. I'm just messing with you. I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm very much type A and like
Yeah.
started this career sabbatical and I'm like first day have this like laundry list of things that I wanted to do. If I were
I
to
mean,
repeat it,
same.
yeah, yeah. If I were to repeat it, I would probably have taken a little bit of that pressure off of me and even my next career break or mini retirement, like I know I'm probably going to be doing a little bit less or at least having less expectations. But I'm with you.
Mhm,
Like I love to do things. Like I'm like cool, one day of rest and then like the next day I wake up refreshed and I'm like, "All right, I'm kind of like itching to work on something." And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the reason behind the career break wasn't to drown yourself in work, but more times than not, it's probably to scratch curiosity or to go be playful or to go be creative. So, how can you find something tangible or something purpose driven that gives you some structure throughout your day, that gives you something to work towards that isn't necessarily so related or correlated with work? So, like, if you're
mhm,
like a consultant in your day job and you just like left that time, my suggestion to you would not to be working on starting your own independent consulting practice. Like, maybe it is just like going and tapping into some kind of childhood hobby that brought you so much joy and fulfillment. Like your personal example of when you took time off and then you refound painting or you just like
mhm,
invested in painting, I think is like a perfect example of like how I would help someone craft their sabbatical or their career break. So me personally, it was something totally different. Like I was working in finance and I decided to become a podcaster. Like I never once identified as someone that was a creative or a creator. And this opportunity allowed me to step into that. And it still like drove some like fulfillment and that like need for my type A. Like every day I just did one podcast activity. Like it was like spend 30 minutes on your podcast. That was like my goal for the day. So it could be like having an interview, it could be prepping for an interview, it could be working on the branding, it could be marketing the show. Like I just like that gave me a good sense of structure along with like a couple of other things. Like I really wanted to refine reading. So I do 20 minutes of reading a day and I was working on a running streak. Like every day I wanted to run during my sabbatical, so I'd go for a 2-mile run. Like those three things alone was about an hour, hour and a half of work. It gave me like a good sense of structure for my day. Like I'd wake up, I'd go for my run, I'd shower, I'd go out, I'd grab a cup of coffee, sit on the porch, read for my 20 minutes, finish that up, probably go piddle around, chat with whoever was available, and then I'd go do my 30 minutes of a podcast activity. Then I'd be done by like 1 p.m. And it was like so amazing and refreshing. I felt this sense of accomplishment for the day. And then I had this whole afternoon and evening ahead of me to go and do whatever my curiosity kind of brought me to.
mhm. For those who are like, they're thinking this is exciting, they're like, "This sounds great, I've always wanted to do painting and podcasting and hiking and, like, all these little things," and right, it's funny because the little things end up becoming big things. It's just funny how that happens. I think there are some people who are, like, not panicking, but who are like, "If I do this and I take this for myself, like, what if I don't like it?" Right? What happens if I need to go back to home, right? Go back to home base, return to my job, or if I'm like, "Actually, I don't even think I like entrepreneurship," or at this point in my time in my life, I don't feel good. I don't wanna do that. Typically, or in the past, career breaks is seen or was seen, much like job hopping, as a bad thing. So, like, what are some strategies or suggestions how people can explain to an employer or even potential clients in the future if they do go down a freelance sort of route to highlight the benefits of them taking time off or again that career break however long it is.
Yeah, to address your first question, which was just around like what happens if I decide that what I set out to do was not something that I really enjoyed doing. Well, what I would say in response to that is like congrats, you figured that out. You figured
Mhm.
that out before you blew up your entire career too. That's why I love mini retirements because it allows you to test drive what is on your mind for kind of your post career or maybe potential career transition. Like maybe you do think that you want to become a painter and you want to leave your corporate job and be a painter. You take a mini retirement, you give yourself 3 months and you paint and you kind of play the day to day life of a painter, not somebody that's necessarily going back to this employer. And then by that end of the 3 months, you're like, I actually hate painting. I don't really like it. Like maybe, or maybe I just don't see it as something that I want to transition my career towards, like success then. Like that's why you do a mini retirement to test drive and see if that's something that you actually like doing or not. You don't step into your very first car whenever you're looking for a new car and you're like, yep, this is the one. No, you try multiple cars and you're like, cool, actually, I like this one for this reason the most. Or whenever I'm thinking about mini retirements or, maybe whenever I decide to transition out of corporate life, this is something that I'd want to do in this degree. Like maybe I do want to continue painting, but I only want it to be a hobby now. Like I just want
Hmm.
to paint on Saturdays. And I found that painting every day of the week or painting for clients isn't necessarily what I want to do. Sweet. Now you're on to like phase two and you get to go and experiment or try something next. And you didn't blow up your life or your career and like you have something to come back to. So I find it a success no matter if you found what you spend your time on during your mini retirement, something you want to continue doing or not doing. Re-entering the workforce is a whole different conversation. Honestly, I didn't have as big of a struggle re-entering the workforce. COVID helped with that a little bit because tons of people got laid off. I took my retirement December 2019, was planning to come back July 2020. Of course, COVID kind of landed right in the middle of that. So my travel got blown up. A lot of my mini retirement plans got changed. But so many people got laid off during that time. So whenever I started to apply and try to re-enter the workforce, I didn't get as many questions because so many people were laid off at that point in time.
Hmm.
But what I would do is have a story for why I took that time off, how it helps me as a better employee now, and then I would articulate that to the recruiting staff. So, and you don't, once again, kind of same with your exit story or that story that you're telling your manager. You don't have to explain everything that you did during your mini retirement, but just anchor on one. And for me, that was podcasting. So whenever I told them why I took the time off, I wanted to launch a podcast. And here is the example of all the podcasts that I created during this time. And here are the tangible skills that I learned and how they correlate to the job that I'm currently applying to. And as soon as I articulated that and shared that story with them, they're like, holy cow, like this guy has all of this corporate experience prior to this. He also took this really amazing experience and turned it into a professional development plan for him. Like it
Yeah.
almost qualified me more to an extent.
Yeah. I think sometimes employers, they can view that as a really attractive thing to be like, oh, this person's a doer, right? They set out
Hmm.
to do something and they achieved it. Because I wouldn't say most people are who are in corporate or coasters, that's not correct. But I will say if you have an entrepreneurial itch, there's a natural problem solving, I'm going to figure out how to get the shit done sort of mentality that is a requirement for certain jobs in corporate, right? You need people who are proactive and things like that. I mean, even with people who do job hopping, it's all about framing. I've job hopped aggressively in my corporate career. I think I job hopped about 4 times within a year and a half. And a lot of people, they didn't want to take interviews with me for that reason. But once I framed it as like, hey, this was a toxic job, I needed to leave. Okay, cool, we get it. Oh, this one didn't have growth. Okay, cool, we get it. Like, it's more just about explaining it and framing it than it is about hiding it or running away from it. Like, it is what happens. Like, it also, I feel like there's a sort of shift happening in the world where people are like understanding humanness more. And once you get
Yes.
on the human level, then it's like, oh, okay, you're not a robot. You actually needed to pursue that craft or that vision or fucking take a break. Like for
Yes.
real. Finally, people are more apt, they're more understanding of the mental health struggles, but I think we still do have a ways to go, which is why people are looking for sabbaticals because they need to recuperate a little bit. It's still, it's wonky times, really wonky times.
Yeah. I spent a year in talent acquisition and recruiting. And if somebody could articulate their story, a gap in their employment or even job hopping was never a negative to me.
Hmm.
And it was only a negative if they came to me and I felt like the problem is you. Like, it's like, yeah, I've been working at these like 5 employers over the last year and one didn't pay well and, another one didn't train me. And it's like, okay, there's a couple of red flags that are there. But if you articulate the story and you can share, like, yes, there is space and nuance in recruiting that you are allowed to share.
So, I mean, I feel like we could have like a whole other episode, not only about this, but also about your podcasting business, which is something you do presently, right? So, I think actually, just in the sake of, time and stuff like that and how meaty this episode already is, we'll just leave it at that. And I'll invite you on for a second episode if
Yeah.
you're down for that in the future. But one final thing I like to do with every single episode is just ask one final wrap up question. And actually, for the past 3 years since I've been doing the podcast, the question was always if you can give advice to your younger self, what would that be? But I actually decided to change it up. And today I'd like to ask you, if you're okay with it, how has your life turned out differently than you expected? if it did?
Oh my gosh, it's so different. Not even like different from like my 20-year-old self to my 30-year-old self, but like different from the last 2 years to now. Like I was not a business owner 3 years
Isn't
ago.
that
Like
nuts? Like, truly
like
nuts.
just like thinking about that, you're just like, holy shit. Like the amount of malleability and change that can happen in such a short window is somewhat terrifying, but also like super motivating to me. And that's why I'm a big proponent of FIRE and just like financial freedom in general. Because to be honest, like I don't know what I'm planning to do whenever I hit financial independence. But the fact that I will be able to make that decision in the moment is super, super attractive to me. The fact that I'm just like, you know what? At 38, whenever I hit financial independence, if I'm like super into plants at that time and I want to like just go work at a store for $12 an hour and I just don't really give a fuck about the money, I can do that and I can make that decision because money and salary is no longer like a number one, two, or three in terms of my priorities for my career and my professional life, but maybe like eight, nine, or 10. And purpose and mission and curiosity and so many other things are got to be way more important to me at that time. So I'm really just excited for that. And I know I really didn't answer your question, but like I'm just like blown away by the transformation in such a little period of time. Like once again, I still don't understand how I'm running a business right now. I mean, a bunch of people are paying me to handle their podcast services. It's just like incredible, and I'm so grateful for it, and also so proud of my own self.
Yeah. Well, you should be proud. I think I mean, I'm a business owner too. When people ask like what is different, how can you put one singular thing on it? You know,
Hmm.
it's personal, it's professional, it's health-wise, it's relationship, I mean everything. But maybe that isn't the best interview question then for me to ask people because it's so generalized, but I just figured I'd give it a shot since we're
I,
both business owners, but
I like
and we
it.
do podcasting, so
The one thing that I actually like, if I want to give you something tangible, the transition from non-business owner to business owner, and this might be really relevant to your audience too. The thing that I've learned or the confidence that I've gained is that like I can create money. Like I
yeah.
can make money. And I thought I could probably do that whenever I was just a 9 to 5 employee, but then starting your own business, creating side hustles, like you get confident in the fact that like if my bank account went to zero tomorrow, I feel very confident that I could find ways not only like a year from now, but tomorrow to make
Yeah.
money because I have practiced that so much over the last 3 years. And like I said, this transition from corporate employee to business owner has really affirmed that for me.
Yeah, and there's no like nothing more powerful and reassuring when you realize you can figure shit out on your own when even when shit hits the fan. If your employer fires you, lays you off, the world goes to shit, like and everything changes. That's kind of hard when you put your eggs all in one basket, but if you are, the person kind of calling the shots, like if you're selling podcasting services today and then tomorrow you decide you want a dog grooming business, fuck it, do it. Or whatever. So anyway, we'll wrap the podcast up here. I'll bring Justin on for all of y'all to talk about podcasting stuff and scaling a business and all of that separately. Any final things you want to add to, before we kind of wrap this up?
No, if you want to listen to the show, it's called The Struggle is Real. It's on the podcast player that you're listening to right now. I've had a lot of recent episodes that have brought me so much joy. If you're looking for an episode to listen to, episode 143 with Rachel Camp, we talked all about work optionality. It will probably expand on a lot of the ideas that we talked about today and probably give you a lot of motivation to not only pursue fire, but also start to build the life that you're really looking to build.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Anyone listening, you can check the show notes, again, YouTube to witness this live, as well as check out all of Justin's information. And yeah, we'll talk really soon. You'll be back really, really soon. But thank you so much for today. And tell Gabby I said hi. For those listening, I think Gabby, his girlfriend, was episode, I don't know, like 16, 17, 18, somewhere around there. So if you want
The
to go
early
all the way
teens.
back to the beginning, yeah. So go all the way back there a couple of years ago. She was one of my first episodes. So it's cool to get full circle, boyfriends in view, kind of, a few years later, we're still kicking. So it's cool. But thank you
Thanks.
so much for coming on.
And thanks for inviting me, Gabby.